The sea was whispering that night. Soft waves curled around the rocks like sleepy fingers, and the moon painted silver trails across the sand. Above the shoreline, gulls rested with their heads tucked under wings, while below the surface, something shimmered that did not belong to the deep. Beneath a sky full of stars, a little girl named Miri crouched by the edge of a tide pool, her eyes wide and glowing in the moonlight. Her fingertips brushed the cool water, tracing shapes in the reflections. Somewhere far off, a lighthouse blinked a lonely rhythm, and the breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed. She was not supposed to be there, not so late, not so close to the water. But something had pulled her from her bed, a dream, or maybe a wish. The kind of wish that presses into your chest and won't let go until you find out if it's real. In the stillness, a faint glow lit up the tide pool. At first, Miri thought it was just the moon catching the shells, but then she saw it a starfish, larger than her hand, pulsing with golden light. Its arms moved slowly, not like crawling, but like dancing. The light seemed to breathe. Miri leaned closer. The world quieted, until all she could hear was her own heartbeat and the soft gurgle of the waves. The starfish lifted slightly, as if reaching for her. The water glowed brighter. Then, without warning, the tide pool pulled. Not the water, something deeper, Miri gasped. But there was no time to cry out. The moon shimmered once, and the girl was gone. The world blinked sideways. Not upside down, not quite inside out, just sideways. Miri felt it first in her breath. The air wasn't air anymore. It was thicker, cooler, full of bubbles that tickled her nose. She opened her eyes slowly, but they did not sting. All around her stretched a curtain of shifting blue, sunbeams slanting down from the surface like golden spears. Her arms, no, not arms, moved strangely. She tried to wiggle her fingers, but they were gone. In their place, 5 short limbs fanned outward, soft and strong, each covered in tiny suction cups. Miri turned, though there was no up or down, and saw her own reflection ripple on the surface of a smooth rock. She was a starfish. The golden one from the tide pool must have been more than just a sea creature. It had been something magical, something ancient. And now, somehow, she had taken its place. The sea around her bustled with life. A school of silver fish darted past like flying arrows, turning in perfect rhythm. Strands of green kelp waved lazily nearby, and a crab inched sideways across the sand, its eyes bobbing curiously, but none of it scared her. Miri didn't feel afraid, only full of wonder. She reached moved toward a coral ledge, her limbs finding grip with surprising ease. Each movement felt natural, as if her new body knew exactly what to do. And there, perched beside a shimmering anemone, sat a small creature with glistening purple fins and eyes like polished stones. It was not a fish, not quite. More like a cross between a fish and a dragonfly, with wings that flickered like rain. The creature tilted its head. The creature did not speak, but something passed between them. A feeling, recognition. Miri understood this was Luma, the tide messenger, keeper of sea secrets. Luma's wings flicked once, and a trail of bubbles rose upward. Miri followed, gliding through the water, her limbs catching the current like sails. They passed great towers of coral shaped like castles and tunnels lit by glowing shrimp. A sea turtle floated overhead, massive and slow, nodding as they passed. Luma led her to a cave, where the water grew darker. Inside, walls shimmered with quartz veins and strange paintings underwater murals drawn in glowing ink. Miri floated closer. The paintings told a story. A starfish swapping places with a landchild. A spell, a warning, a promise. A deep rumble echoed through the cave. Miri spun to see a shadow forming at the entrance. It was another starfish, darker and enormous, with eyes like storm clouds, the elder of the deep. He had watched the exchange. His presence was heavy, like an ancient wave that never broke. Miri felt her limbs freeze. The elder's gaze pressed into her like the weight of 1,000 tides. He pulsed once, and the cave walls flickered. Miri saw visions, stars falling into oceans, children reaching through water, a balance held by thread. She had not just swapped for play. The golden starfish had chosen her to keep something safe. Luma circled beside her, his glow steady and calm. The elder faded into the walls, leaving only the echo of a message, "Find the Heartstone before the tide turns." Miri didn't understand yet, but her body knew to move. She followed Luma through a winding valley of rocks, where sea urchins clung like tiny suns. Each turn brought new marvels, jellyfish that lit up in spirals, dolphins singing deep songs, and seashells that clicked like tiny bells. But then came the tremble. The water stirred unnaturally. Sand rose in clouds, and the current twisted backward. Fish scattered. The seafloor cracked slightly beneath her. Luma dove sharply. Miri followed, tumbling through the shifting tide until they reached a trench, narrow, dark, and silent. Down they went, where even the sunbeams dared not follow. The water grew cold. There, hidden among black rocks, sat a glowing crystal pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The Heartstone. It wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. Miri could feel it calling, not in words, but in waves, longing, waiting, needing. As she reached out with one soft limb, the water trembled again. From the shadows slithered something long and pale, with many eyes and too many teeth, the guardian of the trench, not evil, but ancient, protecting the stone from those who weren't ready. Miri didn't move. She couldn't run. She remembered the elder's gaze, the murals, the feeling that this was no game. The guardian waited, testing her. She pressed her limb gently against the Heartstone. Not to take it, just to feel it, to listen. A pulse shot through her, warm and wild and wise. The guardian blinked its many eyes. Then slowly, it sank back into the shadows, leaving the stone untouched. Luma spun with joy, casting little sparks through the water. Miri knew what had happened. She had passed the trial, not by force, but by feeling, by respecting the sea's secrets. She wrapped herself around the Heartstone, and the world changed again. Colors rushed like rivers through the water. The walls of the trench melted into starlight. Miri felt herself lifting, not swimming, but rising out of the sea, out of the blue, into the sky, into silence. She floated in a place between, a place where the sea met the stars. There, in the middle of everything, hovered the golden starfish. Not just a creature, but a guardian, a spirit older than waves. It pulsed gently, sending Miri a memory of her own hand reaching into the tide pool, her eyes filled with longing. The starfish had not chosen her by mistake. It had seen her wonder, her kindness, her wish to know the sea, not to control it, but to understand it. But now, the sea needed her heart to return to its place. Her time as a starfish was almost over. Miri pulsed once in agreement. She was ready. The starfish extended its golden arm. Light filled the space between them. And just like that, Miri began to fall. Not fast, not hard, like a feather in water. Back through the stars, through the waves, back to the tide pool. The fall slowed as Miri neared the tide pool, as if time itself held its breath. She felt her limbs shifting, her soft starfish arms stretching and curling back into fingers, elbows, and shoulders. Her skin tingled as it changed, and the sea's cool embrace gave way to the evening breeze brushing her cheeks. She landed gently in the tide pool, knees sinking into wet sand, hands trembling as she looked around. The night was still. The moon still shimmered on the water. Gulls called softly from the cliffs, and the lighthouse blinked in the distance, steady, calm. But something was wrong. The tide pool was darker than before, the golden glow gone. The water churned slightly, like something restless was moving beneath it. Miri stood up slowly. Her clothes clung to her, soaked but warm. She stepped back from the pool, heart racing. Then she saw it. On the sand, not far from where she'd first crouched, lay the golden starfish, dim, fading. Its glow flickered weakly, and its arms barely moved. It had returned in her place, but it was not well. Miri rushed to it, falling to her knees beside the creature that had given her the sea. She reached out a hand, but stopped, unsure. Could she help? Was there a way to give something back? A shiver of cold wind swept over the shore. The tide crept higher. And in that moment, the earth felt like it was leaning, not just the sand beneath her, but everything. Like the balance the elder had warned her about was tilting. Then she heard it. A deep, slow crack from the cliffs above. Miri's head snapped up. A jagged line split the rocks far above the shore, and a chunk of the cliffside began to slide. The lighthouse beam swept across it once, then again, as the stone broke loose. Miri's heart leapt. The rock was tumbling toward the very place she knelt. She scooped up the golden starfish with trembling hands and ran bare feet splashing through shallow tide pools, slipping on wet stones. Behind her, the cliff groaned. Pebbles scattered down like rain. Her lungs burned, her legs shook. But she didn't stop. She reached a cluster of tall rocks, just as the boulder crashed down, sending a thunderous roar across the beach. Sand flew, water erupted, a cloud of sea mist filled the air. Miri crouched behind the stones, shielding the starfish with her body. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the sea. Then silence. When the mist cleared, the beach looked different. One of the tide pools was crushed, buried under stone. The golden starfish in her hands pulsed once faintly, but steady. She looked down at it. Something deep in her chest shifted. A warmth, a knowing. She had been given the sea not just to explore, but to protect, and now she had a choice. She rose slowly, cradling the golden starfish, and stepped into the shallow water of the remaining tide pool. The sea lapped at her ankles. The stars above shimmered. This was her moment. She lowered the starfish into the water. At first, it lay still. Then light. Golden pulses rippled through the pool. The water lit up from within, spreading out like sunbeams under the surface. Fish returned, swimming in curious spirals. The rocks shimmered with bioluminescent moss, and Luma's soft glow reappeared beside her. The sea had accepted the starfish back. But Miri knew something else. The stone in the trench, the danger in the cliffs, these were signs. The balance was fragile. It wasn't enough to visit magic. She had to protect it. Suddenly, Luma rose higher above the tide pool. His wings stretched wide. From his body burst a stream of tiny lights like stars being scattered across the sky. They swirled around Miri, brushing her skin, warming her heart. Then images. Visions of the underwater murals. The heartstone glowing strong. The elder watching from the cave. Miri standing beside the tide, one hand outstretched. Not as a child curious, but as a guardian chosen. Luma's eyes met hers one last time. Then he vanished into the stars. The tide rolled in gently, covering the golden starfish until only its faint glow remained beneath the surface. To learn the ways of the coast, the patterns of the tide, the stories of the waves. Maybe one day she would study the sea for real. Maybe she would protect it in the human world too. For now, she had done what mattered most. She had listened. She had cared. She had chosen to give back. The wind blew gently over the shore. As Miri walked home through the sand, her steps soft, her heart full. Behind her, the tide pulled in. Quiet, peaceful. And somewhere deep beneath the waves, the heartstone pulsed strong. Morning came slowly. The sky shifted from blue-black to rose-gold, and the waves glistened with 1,000 tiny sparkles, as if the stars had sunk into the sea to rest. Miri stood at the edge of her garden, looking out toward the cliffs. The smell of salt lingered in her hair, and though she was back in her world, everything felt different. The tide had gone out, leaving behind a stretch of smooth sand and scattered seaweed. The broken cliffside stood sharp and jagged against the sky. The wound of last night still fresh, but the danger had passed. For now, her fingers brushed the damp fabric of her coat pocket. Tucked inside was a single star-shaped pebble, smooth, golden brown, and warm despite the breeze. She hadn't put it there. It had appeared just as she'd stepped out of the tide pool, quiet and still, as though the sea had left her a gift. She walked home that evening feeling light as a feather. That night, she dreamed of coral and glowing shrimp, of turtles and murals painted on underwater cave walls. She dreamed of the guardian blinking his many eyes and slowly, quietly nodding. In the dream, she wasn't a visitor. She was a part of it. Months passed. The cliff was repaired, the rocks cleared, and the beach made safe again. But Miri always remembered where the boulder had fallen. Miri recognized that look. The girl turned to her and asked softly if the sea stars really came out at night. Miri paused. Then she knelt beside her and pointed to a flat rock just under the water. A pale arm of a starfish was tucked there, almost invisible against the stone. They waited, watched, and the arm twitched. The girl gasped. Not with fear, but joy. Miri smiled. That same joy had once lit her own chest like a lantern. Now it was lighting someone else's. The old marine biologist, Mr. Denley, saw her one morning crouched by a pool with her notebook and said she had keen eyes. He asked if she'd like to join him on his rounds, checking the sea levels and recording the temperatures. Miri nodded. Not because she wanted to tell him everything, but because something inside her knew this was part of it too. The sea wasn't only magic, it was also science, and it needed both to be safe. One evening, Miri returned to the tide pool where it all began. The sun was setting, casting warm pinks and oranges across the water. She crouched beside the same pool, where tiny fish darted through the reflections, and ran her fingers along the sand. No golden glow rose this time. No magic pulled her into the deep, but she wasn't sad. The magic hadn't left her. It had simply returned to where it belonged, like the tide returning to the sea. As she sat in the silence, a small crab scuttled past her toes. She smiled, dipping her fingers in the pool. He had lived beside the sea all his life, and though he didn't ask where she'd gone the night before, he seemed to understand something had changed. He only handed her a pair of small boots and a notebook with a wink, as if to say, "You're ready now." Miri took the notebook to the cliffs. She sat among the wildflowers, listening to the gulls and the whisper of the waves below, and she began to draw. She sketched the shape of the coral towers, the glow of the trench, the shimmer of Luma's wings. Miri stepped back from the pool, watching as the water smoothed over. The beach was still again, but she was not the same. The sea was in her now. Its memories, its mystery, its magic. She could feel its pulse in her chest, quiet and deep. She turned back toward the cliff, where the landslide had scarred the rock. Something inside her stirred an idea. Not magic this time, something real, something human. She would come back, not just to watch, to help. One day, Mr. Denley handed her a polished badge, a tiny circle with a blue wave, and the words, "Young Coastal Guardian" beneath it. Miri held it in her palm, then pressed it gently to her heart. The sea had given her its secrets, and she had given it her promise. To listen, to protect, to remember. Far beneath the waves, in a place where no light reached, the Heartstone pulsed, not with warning this time, but with peace. And above it, drifting through coral towers, Luma watched the tides. He spun once in joy, for the girl who had swapped places with a starfish had not just returned. She had become something more, a keeper of wonder, a friend to the sea.